How is it going, everybody? So today on the podcast, we have Mike Parnell, who is, if I tried to name off all the different things he's done, it would just be a little exhausting, but here we go. So former CEO and financier of Oakley Sunglasses back when they started, and they had 16 employees, so he's a partner there. Worked for OP, Ocean Pacific, before they were a Walmart brand, and they were doing 500 million in sales. He worked with the Olympic skydiving team. He was actually on the Olympic skydiving team for the U.S. or the U.S. national team, I think it is. Has had interactions, obviously, with Michael Jordan, founder of Starbucks, Lance Armstrong, Scott Tinley in the tri world. Just has a really awesome story, and he's going to be sharing a little bit about that today. And this is one of my most favorite conversations so far, just because it's so dense and rich with experience. And stay tuned toward the end. Mike gives a pretty awesome, solid piece of advice for something that he's learned for anybody who's looking to be successful in this world. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Mike Parnell. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for coming on the Stupid Questions podcast, and just really excited to get to document a little bit of your story and hopefully ask some good questions, some stupid questions, and learn a little bit, and then hopefully everyone who's listening can learn a thing or two as well.
All right.
So what have you been up to lately?
Well, I've been doing a little fly fishing. Finished up a great snowboarding season with my son. And this is a graduation week for a school that we help start up on the little island that I live on. So it's fairly hectic. A lot of families coming up, coming and going, a lot of activities. So it's kind of a busy but fun time of year. So.
Yeah, for sure. So to kind of get started, I would just love to, because I've obviously known you for a good while, and I have a lot of prior contacts to knowing some of your family, but I would love to go back to as far back as you allow us in your life story and just hear a little bit about, like, who was Mike when he was 10, 11, 12 years old growing up? What was he into? What were his ambitions in life?
Okay. I'll try to remember back that far. No, growing up, I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas. We moved to North Carolina. Then my dad got a job. He's a commercial pilot in Puerto Rico. So I lived in Puerto Rico that's probably my earliest memories, is going out and building a tree house with 4 bamboo shoots. And the next day it'd be 1.5 feet higher. Unfortunately, not all level, but that's kind of my fondest memories. And that was kind of when I first started flying. When I was probably 7 or 8, I'd sit in Dad's lap, and later the right seat, he had an old V-tail Bonanza. So we flew from North Carolina to Puerto Rico several times a year normally.
How long's that flight?
It's probably about 3 hours in 3 or 4 hours in his plane. Anyway, I just thought driving was the way to go, and I never had an interest in driving a car. It just seemed like so slow and inefficient. But so kind of after that, I always enjoyed sports, and maybe not just sports, but I really love competition. I love the preparation. I like the practice. I like the participation, and especially the mental aspects that go along with that. So any sport that I could play, I did. Everything was a competition with neighborhood kids. We used to have firework wars, where you'd stand across the street from each other and shoot bottle rockets at each other, and any other ordnance that we could get our hands on. Is kind of stupid, no eye protection, but hey, it was really fun. And so then I went to, actually my freshman year in high school, my dad went to work at an FBO. That's a fixed base operator at an airport where private airplanes come in and out. And my dad's good friend had cancer treatment going on, so he committed to take a year off and go run his business for him. And that's why I went to high school at a boarding school in Ohio for my freshman year. I worked at the airport, and I didn't get paid in money, but I did get paid in airplane time. So, legally in the U.S., you can solo when you're 16 years old, and usually you'll have 20 hours or so to solo. And I think I soloed on my 16th birthday, and I think I had 250 hours. A lot of that
Wow.
over ocean travel to Puerto Rico, back and forth. But so when I graduated from high school, I didn't have any money, and I didn't really appreciate what an opportunity it was to have that access to aircraft and
Yeah.
flying and whatnot. So um, I didn't, and my roommate and I saw an ad in the Houston Chronicle. I'd moved to Houston after high school about I think it was called Houston School of Parachuting. And we thought, hey, let's just make a jump. And so we took this little course. It was a couple of Wednesday nights at this guy's backyard. And this was old military surplus parachuting gear, 7 TUs, the old round orange and white parachutes. We fondly called them nylon hammers because you just land so hard in those things. And you could kind of turn them, but not really. And
Yeah.
so we went out, we made our jump, kind of our little bucket list, thing. And we just both loved it. We ended up making 2 more that day. We went back the next weekend and next weekend. And then we bought our own equipment. And that became kind of my passion. I thought my career path was if I could ever own a drop zone where I could jump every day, that would just be epic. And we ended up coming out to Lake Elsinore, California, to try out for the USA Skydiving Team. And we weren't that skilled, but we were interested and passionate about it. And there's probably about 20 other people that showed up to try out for 2 openings on the U.S. team that year. And so 18 of us didn't make it. But we just had a great time. And so my roommate and I got with 8 of the other people that didn't make it that we thought were the highest quality. We thought hey, why don't we start our own team? Because there's a nationals that was held in Oklahoma at that time where whoever wins the U.S. Nationals is the U.S. team and represents the United States in international competition. So I actually moved to Lake Elsinore. My roommate commuted every weekend. He was an idiot, I think, but he had a great job back there, and it worked out. So I'd pick him up at LAX Friday night and drop him off Sunday for that 11:30 flight back to Houston.
Wow.
And so at the Nationals that year, we beat the U.S. team. It's a bunch of privateers against well-sponsored free gear, free jump, group. And after that, we probably did about 250 jumps a year practicing, and then plus all the competition. And that was international. We jumped all over the world. The next 2 world meets that we won, one was in South Africa. The next one was in Yugoslavia, but we jumped into Red Square in China. We jumped downtown Moscow. We jumped onto the Great Wall of China for orange juice calendar. Mount Fiji, jumped over the Matterhorn and glided 17 miles into a little town called Saas-Fee in Switzerland, just Australia, New Zealand. It was just a fantastic journey. And during that time, my first kind of real job after collecting unemployment and do freelance advertising and anything else I could think of was the captain of our skydiving team said, hey, a couple of buddies of mine are starting a surfwear company called OP, or Ocean Pacific. And I think they need some kind of advertising help or whatnot. Well, that's kind of what I'd done to supplement my unemployment income. Yeah. So I approached them. There was a very, very young startup. This was out of their garage. They offered me a job. They didn't know how much they could pay me, and they asked if I could bring my own desk. But anyway, I thought, well, I can still do some freelance ads, and I'll have a place to work. So I brought an old desk and set it up in their warehouse, started doing their advertising, and just working on building that brand, and it just exploded and really took off. And
now was this at the same time that you were still continuing to jump?
Yeah, great question. So once we got on the U.S. team, it usually, if you had a real job, it required about 13 and a half weeks of vacation a year. So I did a lot of selling. I called in sick a few times, whatever it took. After they realized what was going on, OP was really great about it. They encouraged me to go. They
Oh,
posted
cool.
my results on the company newsletter and with their retail accounts. And I ended up jumping into a lot of their trade shows and
Oh,
hotel
cool.
conferences with our team and things like that. So it was really kind of a cool little partnership, although I probably got the advantage of that relationship. And
Yeah.
so as OP grew, mostly I learned what not to do as far as building, brands,
Mm-hmm.
about how to protect your brand. It's more important who you don't sell than who you sell,
Mm.
um, for certain consumer brands anyway.
Sure.
And OP made a lot of decisions, some that I were against, some that I should have been more vocal, against. But so anyway, the brand got up to about $500 million, and it grew so fast we couldn't produce enough. So we just rented our logo out to sewing contractors, but we did the marketing, we had the sales force, we did the trade shows. It was
Sure.
kind of a hybrid of what a typical licensing agreement would be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, when we
Was
started,
quality?
pardon?
Sorry if I may interrupt, but was it? So you said you were contracting with these different cut and sew shops to be able to make that happen is one thing, but to keep up with the quality standard that I'm assuming you guys had, but you were growing so fast, was quality something that you were able to kind of keep a grip on?
Yeah, we had a fairly large, even though we didn't produce one thing, Seth, we probably had about 120 people in merchandising, which is quality control,
Mm-hmm.
marketing, a sales force, legal, all of that. And so quality was really important, but that was also one of the things that I really think tanked our brand. Here's the biggest example. So the merchandise, we made surf trunks and walk shorts, these cord walk shorts with cargo pockets, size 24 to 32, because that's what surfers wore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the merchandising department made this presentation to the board that if we do size 36 to 42, we will sell 1 million more units of walk shorts and surf trunks a year. Well, the board they looked at the financial reward of doing that.
Yeah.
And our marketing and advertising department, our argument was like, hey, how many surfers do you know with a 42-inch waist? You know, that size waist in an age group probably has a lot of merit, but not for our brand. But anyway, I think the money was just so compelling that
Yeah.
we
They
started
wanted it.
making those sizes, and we actually sold more than 1 million pairs extra the first year. But the day that I
Wow.
walked out of my house and Dad was doing some yard work, and you see the plumber's crack on a 42-inch waist, pretty soon surfers, we went from being the hottest brand west of the 405 freeway to it just the brand just nosed over. And it was
Yeah.
kind of during that time where I was frustrated, discouraged, and I had a guy that was starting up a sunglass company who wanted to co-sponsor a televised surfing event that ABC was doing in Hawaii. And he said, hey, can we co-sponsor? I have this new sailboarding glass, and we think it'd be great exposure for us. Well, we had an accessories licensee that didn't
Mm-hmm.
make sunglasses, but they had the right to make sunglasses, so we couldn't. But I got to know this gentleman, and their office was down the freeway from OP, and he asked me to stop in. I walked in this little tiny warehouse and office, and he had a bunch of kind of antique video games. We're talking StarCrafters and Pac-Man, that vintage.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times on the way home, I drive past it every day. He'd call and stop, and we'd talk shop and play video games. And finally, he just called one day and he said, hey, I want to get this sunglass out. Can you come do some like T-shirts or hats or something so we can afford to get this glass out? We'd like to have come to work for us. So I kind of cashed out of OP, took that money and invested it in Oakley. We had this guy from Romania that did clay models of this glass.
Mm-hmm.
And
Clay. Wow. Do they still do that?
no. And it was, you can still tell the original one, Seth, because the left side was never the same mirror image of the right side.
Wow.
And if you made one little change, you just had to trash the clay model and then start over. Now
Wow.
everything's done on a CAD cam, and we have this stereolithography apparatus that does it in layers. And where it used to take 3 weeks to come up with a frame, this will do it in about 3 hours, and it'll even have the slots for the lens. You can put lenses in it, see how it works, how the hinges articulate. It's a different game, now.
Yeah.
But so anyway, we had this. They had this sailboarding glass. I started working with them, and I got a call from a guy up in Lake Tahoe, and he goes, "Hey, wonder if I can get a deal on 6 pair of your sailboarding glasses. I cross train with those. I cross country ski, but I like them because those glasses, they were hideous looking, but they were super functional. So it almost looked like a goggle front, but it had ear stems, so the venting was really good. And they were adjustable and had a foam piece on the top for perspiration. And anyway, he said, I cross train, but I race bicycles over in Europe, and I'm leaving for a race. Can I get a deal on 6 pairs? So we sold him 6 pairs at wholesale. And
You didn't know what the race was at this point, did you?
no, I didn't know who this cat was either. We were primarily a surf and a motocross company. And so a few weeks later, this guy wins the first 2 or 3 stages of the Tour de France. And it was Greg LeMond. And all of a sudden, our sailboarding glass became the Greg LeMond cycling glass. So, we worked really hard just to get lucky in that case. And so that kind of put us on the map. And then the triathlete market found us. Scott Tinley was one of our first gentlemen, and that's kind of how we discovered Lance Armstrong. His mom used to drive him. He was a swimmer, and he liked to run, and started out with triathlons. We took him he and his mom to the first triathlon where Scott Tinley and Dave Scott and all the big names in the sport were competing, and Lance actually came in 3rd or 4th in that event. And they're interviewing him afterwards, and he said, "Well, Lance, what do you think about your first triathlon?" He goes, "Well, it's a pretty easy sport, really." So we knew that if we were going to work with Lance, that we had to send him to charm school for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, a little bit.
Probably.
What race was that, by the way? Do you remember?
It was the Oceanside. It was an annual event.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the Oceanside Triathlon. It was big.
Yeah, it's still big. Yeah. I don't know if it was Ironman then. Oceanside 70.3 or.
No, I don't think it was that distance yet. I mean, it was well attended. People from all over the world competed there and whatnot. But anyway, that was our introduction to Lance at that event. And the surf market we kind of dominated, and then some of our glasses we found out we could use, and a lot of baseball players were using them. Before, it was always the flip up, flip down, which is absolutely the worst thing you could do to locate a fly ball is go from bright to dark and have your iris opening and closing while you're trying to locate something. So Cal Ripken, came into our office when they were playing the Angels in Anaheim and said, "Hey, can I get a few of your glasses to wear?" And so just over and over, things like that happened. Al Unser Jr., when Michael Jordan left basketball, we developed a relationship with him when he went to baseball because of our glass. And when he came back, he was an Oakley fan as well. Well, just a lot of kind of divine things happened, I think, that because
so if I may butt in there a little bit, I mean, so I've listened to other podcasts and other crazy founder stories, and there's usually an element of luck, and then people are asked, like, do you think it was luck or hard work? And it's usually a combination of the two. But as I'm sitting here contemplating this story, there's a lot of very low chance but high opportunity moments that seem to have kind of come and just boom, 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 boom. And then you mentioned divine, like, do you think there was divine kind of guidance in that?
Oh, absolutely. My partner and I are just not the sharpest tools in any shed. So, yeah, it had to be. But I also think that we were both willing to take risk. For
Sure.
example, Ray-Ban and Bollé, which were the big guys on the block, we were the small guys. They would always have a tendency to hire last year's winner. And a lot of times, last year's winner is in the twilight of their career and they're making the
Mm-hmm.
most money.
Yeah.
But we had the ability to find out who was next, who was going to be.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite stories is we had such a great, probably about a 7 or 8 year relationship with Scott Tinley. The last year that he won the Ironman triathlon, he says, I think I might retire. I don't know. I might just do a few races. And I encouraged him because he came up to Orcas Island a lot. In fact, he gave me an old Hodaka motorcycle that he had. I encouraged him and said, Scott, don't do that. He said, we're going to write you a contract offer for twice as much money as you're making right now. And I want you to take it to Greg Berry at Ray-Ban and tell him that, hey, Oakley's offered this, but if they'd be willing to assume that same contract, that you would represent them. And he was kind of offended at first. And I said, this is the best thing that's going to happen. They're going to hire you at the twilight of your career. They're going to spend twice as much money as we ever would have. It's a great parting gift for you, and it's not going to make a mark in Ray-Ban's history because you're probably not going to win many races, and you're not going to even enter that many races. So I had fun doing stuff like that. Partly that goes back to the competition because competition isn't always just being the better athlete or competitor. A lot of time it's at our first board meeting, we couldn't get board members. And with our relationship with Michael Jordan, we asked him, do you want to be on our board? And he goes, yeah, I've been thinking about doing business kind of stuff. That'd be fun. So we called back the same people we had offered and asked to be on our board when we were going public. And I said, we got just a couple of slots to fill. We'd like to circle back with you. There's the president of Gatorade, the lady that ran Barnes and Noble, the CEO of Starbucks. And they said, well, who's on your board? And I said, well, it's Jim and I and Irene and Michael Jordan. The basketball player? I'm in. So we had this dream team.
Of course.
I think because people were kind of intrigued and, excited. But our first board meeting, just going back to the competition, Jordan's obviously competitive. So every board meeting, my partner would give a little update, 3-minute on here's new products, here's what we're thinking, pricing. I do a little thing on sales and marketing, what our sales are, what they were, new markets, international distributors, and things like that. And then the finance guy gave a 2 or 3 minute recap. And we always ask at the end of that, anybody have any questions? There was never any questions. I mean, we're on fire kind of anyway. The first board meeting we had to do at the United Center because it was during the Bulls basketball season. Anybody have any questions? Well, Michael Jordan raises his hand like he's in school. And I said, yeah, Michael, what do you got? And he goes, yeah, I see you're making all this killer product and you got a great sales force and these distributors going. He said, but what are you doing to defense your competition? I thought, what do you mean, what are we doing to defense our competition? He says, well, what are you doing to keep them from being successful or, taking any of your sales? It was dead silence for probably a minute. We were kind of looking at each other. What a great question. What a great question that was. So, as a result of that, we formed this guerrilla war team. We actually had a conference room that said war room on it. And we would meet sometimes weekly, sometimes more than that, with how can we screw with our competitors? How can we keep them from taking our shelf space? So, and just simple little things. So this sailboarding glass that became the Greg LeMond glass, for example, we heard Ray-Ban's coming out with that, a knockoff of that for about half as much as what our glass is. So we went to the design department. We got drawings made of something version 2 of our Greg LeMond, glass, and we intentionally leaked it out there that it was going to be less than half of what our glass was. Well, Ray-Ban never introduced that because, the reason they were doing it was they were going to buy market share, and now Oakley's doing it. And we always go, well, there's some delays, but version 2.0 is coming out. Well, it never came out. It was never going to come out. And neither did Ray-Ban's knockoff attempt. So, but we used to go through competitors' trash. Who are they buying suppliers from? Who are they selling? Anytime we heard that someone got fired or laid off, we'd run ads for whatever that position was so we could interview them just to get reconnaissance. A couple of people we actually hired from that exercise. But I felt I knew more about what was going on with Ray-Ban and Bolé than some of their employees did. And, we used to think, if we could ever just be as big as Bolé, and then we kicked their ass. And it was like, if we could just ever be as big as Ray-Ban, then we'd have made it. And we kicked their ass. And that was kind of discouraging or disappointing a little bit because all of a sudden we were the biggest sunglass by sales in the United States. We didn't have an ass to kick for once. So we had to create other competition. We started other brands that we owned that other people didn't know. So we could kind of trash them, give them some visibility, and make our own employees feel like we had a new competition.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to go back a little bit to a few things and then kind of work our way back toward the Oakley days and beyond. The skydiving stuff. We went from you guys jumping, you said like 250 times a year, and then you didn't make that skydiving team, and then you created your own team, and then you became essentially the US Skydiving Team. What was that process like? Because you said you guys weren't great skydivers, but did that take like a lot of determination and passion to continue to build up skill, and then you're creating new?
Yeah, great question. I think we had the same skill. Like most of the guys on the U.S. team at that time had a couple of thousand jumps. We had 400 or 500. So a lot of it was just experience. But it was just like Oakley or OP. We turned over every rock to be competitive. So we were one of the first teams that we hired a cameraman, and it used to be 16 millimeter film, where he would open up that emergency exit window on a DC-3 so he could film our exit. Because for Speedstar's example, it's like your success depends on how quick can you get 10 people out a 3-foot by 5-foot door.
Yeah.
So we started filming, and I found out, what? If we hang on not to the guy in front of us, but to the guy in front of him, we can kind of go out just, it's like a bullwhip. The last guy gets flung all over the place. But so we used camera, and then we would debrief that. So so space is a big issue. So we found a guy that would make smaller parachutes and smaller containers, but closer to zero porosity material. So we could if we could cut 3 or 4 inches off of each person's distance between the person in front of them, that saved about 2 feet. Well, to get the back guy 2 feet closer to the door and a speed, that's huge. That's like having 10 more horsepower than the next best guy. Wow. So just a lot of things like that. But, also we took some risk. We were creative in how we did our formations. We didn't do it the same way that the current U.S. team did it. Like the guys that got out first, they would flare out really big so they would fall slower or accelerate slower. And the guys coming out last were in a head down dive. Well, that was kind of unheard of. But we could cut almost a half a second off of the last guy getting there by just doing little things. So it wasn't one thing 100%. I'd say we did 100 things 1%, just a little more efficient.
Yeah. So for the jumps that you're doing, because we're talking about, you have to get into placement, you have so many seconds that you're falling and this and the other. In competition, are there different altitudes that you're jumping out of? Or is it pretty standard for competition?
Well, it depends on the event. So the first discipline we did was we were a 10-man Speed Star team. So the stopwatch started the first time they saw movement from the airplane, and it stopped as soon as the 10th guy broke into a circle. And that was from about 10,000 feet. Then it got to be so routine and everybody was doing 8 and 10-second stars. They went to 8-man relative work where you had 8 people that skydived and you had 5 to 10 different formations and 5 to 10 different transitions. So that was usually done from 12,500 feet. And you got a point for each completed formation with the correct transition and against 55-second clock. So we held the world record for, and maybe we still do, I don't know, for, I think we did 15 points in 55 seconds.
Wow.
And the big thing of that is it's a mental exercise. Skydiving doesn't take much physical once you get out the plane. It's a mental exercise to remember where you're supposed to be, what you're going to do. Are you facing in, facing out, grabbing wrists, grabbing ankles, spinning with some other guy or three other guys? It's complex. We worked with a sports psychologist from University of Irvine on how to be relaxed and memorize, formations. And that gave us an advantage, especially over the Army Golden Knights. They were very rigid, disciplined, and slow. So we were always, that was my favorite team to beat. $8 million budget. At that time, we got sponsored by a beverage company, but we all were privateers. And that was very satisfying.
Yeah, for sure. Do you still jump anymore?
Yeah, I did a couple of years ago. It had been a few years, but the Red Bull team came up to Orcas, and they brought up, some guy had a helicopter from Las Vegas, and they were looking for jet fuel. And I've got a little jet fuel farm at my hangar. So I said, yeah, can I trade some jet fuel for a couple of jumps? So got to jump with the Red Bull team out of their helicopter over our little island. So,
oh, that's cool. Did you get some film of it?
yeah, I got a couple of pictures. It was funny, though, because everybody's wearing wingsuits now.
Yeah.
Which I'd love to try. And I had my competition suit, which was a skin-tight Lycra suit, because the faster you go, the more effective your control surfaces are.
Yeah.
And these guys just all wanted to come up and take a picture. They'd hold their arms out, and it looks like a mattress. And they said, Mike, let me take a picture. Hold your arms out. And I looked like a scarecrow. So it was really fun. A great group of guys. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then after skydiving, you started getting to the OP days. How big was OP in terms of like numbers on staff when you first started working there?
We had probably about 45 people. When we were still doing the cut and sew, we were probably about 600. Then when we started licensing things out, we're probably about 150 if you include our international offices, in that, and grew to about 500 million in sales, and then started a women's apparel division, and then kids, and it was a great education.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like a fun time. Were they able to, like when you first joined, was it small enough to where you got to jump in on the equity sharing?
No, my partner, or the founders they wouldn't have known what that was.
Okay.
So we got bonuses, and then later they negotiated a thing where after so many years you accumulate some percent of your salary and whatnot. So
Okay, nice.
they're very unsophisticated but passionate surfer guys.
Yeah. How old were you when you like started and then ended that tenure?
Let's see. So I was probably 23 or 24 when I started with them. And I was there for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And then it was like the mid 80s that I left OP and went to work for Oakley. And that I did get equity as part of investing what I'd accumulated and cashed out from OP. But it was sketchy. We had 16 employees. They were only making motocross goggles and hand grips for BMX bikes. And it was touch and go. Jim and I, my partner, we had to take turns on who got paid based on, hey, my apartment's due this month and my car payment's due next week. Can I get paid this pay period and you take the next? And it was touch and go.
Yeah. How did you meet Jim?
Well, he was the one who came and said, hey, can we co-sponsor your surfing event in Hawaii?
Okay.
So we got to develop a relationship then. And
while you were at OP?
While I was at OP, yeah. And it was during that time, kind of when we, a year or two past the size 42, now 48-inch waist. I thought, okay. And he called and goes, hey, will you come work with us and do some hats or T-shirts or something. He said, just so we can get this sunglass out. So
Yeah. So you accumulated quite a bit of business knowledge by that point. Were you and Jim pretty close in age, or are you
yeah,
pretty close in
I
age?
think he's probably about 5 years, 4 or 5 years older than I was. So
Okay, nice. So you partners obviously going through the years and all the growth that you guys went through. Were there any like tense moments, I'm sure, that you kind of gone through, or anything that kind of comes to mind of lessons you learned about like how to be a good partner in a business situation?
well, we communicated well, but mostly we stuck in our lane. So Jim was a gunslinger, and he did all the design work. And I was mostly the sales and marketing, and by default, the finance guy. And it was funny because Jim, a lot of times, would come and he'd take one of these clay model sunglasses. He goes, "Do you like this one or that one?" And when I'd say, "I like that one," he says, "Okay, we're doing this one." Um, and same thing with the marketing. He made this comment a few times. We have the coolest product on the planet. We got the greatest account base on the planet. What do we need to be paying all these salespeople for? I said, well, Jim, if we had the most desirable product and it was free, yeah, we may not, but that's not the case. And if you want to kick our competitors' ass, we need it. We need soldiers in the field to do that. So mostly we just, I'd say we dabbled in each other's territory, but we respected each other's territory. But yeah, we had very tense moments early on. I mentioned that finances were touch and go.
Yeah.
And we needed $100,000 to buy this lens cutting machine because at that time we were importing lens blanks from Japan.
Hmm.
We didn't have any money. We were check kiting in a lot of cases, but so we went to a couple of employees. Mike Bell had he won the Supercross championship that year, and we know he had about a $50,000 bonus. And we said, "Hey, Mike, do you want to loan us $50,000 at 14% interest for a short?" And he was a nice guy, but not that sophisticated on the financial side. He goes, "Yeah, that'd be cool." And he was an employee with us working in our sports marketing department. We went to our warehouse manager, Chris, and his dad owned the largest doggy door manufacturer in
Doggy door.
California. So we asked Chris to set up a meeting with his dad. And we said, look, we want to get this lens cutting machine. We're going to start selling a lot of sunglasses. Would you loan us $50,000 and we will pay you $1 a sunglass that we sell until we pay that loan back?
Oh, that's smart.
And they said, hey, my son loves it there, says you guys have a good. So anyway, bought the lens cutting machine. And it wasn't long before we were selling 30, 40,000 sunglasses a month. But we
That
were
guy was
having to
loving that.
buy raw inventory and more machines. And so it took us about a year to pay Chris's dad back for his doggy door loan. And I think we had paid him close to $1 million by the time we had enough cash,
Oh my goodness.
to pay him back. Mike Bell, we were able to pay back a little sooner by renegotiating the terms. But
Yeah,
so
for sure.
just things like that. But that was a tough time. I
Yeah,
came
for
home
sure.
and told my wife that, hey, I'm leaving OP and I got a job with a sunglass company. And after I found out financially really where they were with what I thought they were, I told my wife, I said, Donnie, I think I've made a horrible career decision because I had a pretty cush deal at OP, 13 weeks vacation and
Yeah.
well paid. And, Don says, oh, I'm sure it'll work out. It'll all be fine. And,
Yeah, and little did
but
you
it,
know.
it was, it was tight there for a while.
Yeah, for sure. And so you said you were at OP for 15 years, was that right?
About, yeah, 13 to 15, somewhere in there. So,
Okay. It's so interesting. I've known you for so long, but I never took into account like the timeline of these things because I mean, I'm 30. So, you were 35, no, going on 40, I guess, when you got to Oakley.
yeah.
Um,
Actually, a little, maybe I'm off on my years. Yeah, I think I was 32 or 3 because I was just
okay.
recently gotten married. So yeah, I must have been 33, 34, maybe.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's still neat though. Just consider the timeline of that. That's really neat.
Right.
So when you went to Oakley, did you continue to jump still then?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how we set up all of our first international distributors. They were all people from the South African, Japanese,
Yeah.
Russian skydiving team that I had met. And actually, the Japanese guy is still our distributor. Everybody
Oh,
else,
really?
it was a great way to introduce some product and get some visibility. But yeah, that's kind of how we got an international footprint. So
Yeah, that's so neat. So with in the beginning when you said you bought the lens cutting machine and you're starting to sell 30,000 a month or so, I mean that's a lot of glasses you're moving. Did you have like a specific channel like within retail or something that was kind of fueling that channel where you could pump out that many, or is it
yeah, no,
peop
it was all retail. You got to remember there was no online sales or internet
Yeah.
at that time really. So it was all retail. We had our first sales rep's territory was Washington State, Oregon, and California. Now a salesman's territory would be the 98245 zip code.
Yeah.
Um, because our goal was is it's not how many doors we have, it's how many dollars per door we can produce. So
Mm,
if you're more exclusive, retailers are going to be more loyal.
yeah.
Um, and we kind of found that was it. And I knew what not to do from OP's broad distribution strategy, and
Yeah, for sure.
it really worked for Oakley better. So
Yeah, for sure. That's really neat. So then you're moving through, and then how long? What are you still with Oakley at any capacity?
uh, well, I'm an alumni, so I'm not. I receive no compensation from them. I still talk to the guys quite regularly. There's still probably 6 or 8 people there that I hired that are still there, and a
Oh,
lot of the
cool.
international offices that I set up. Sometimes I'll be asked to go put out a fire or start a fire, um, but that's kind of it. So my partner after we went public, and I kind of resigned from the board. I think that was around 2001 or two. My partner ended up selling to our biggest competitor, Luxottica, out of Italy, and
Hmm.
not as much contact with Italians now. So
Yeah. So during all of these kind of business ventures up to the, I guess, Oakley point, what is something like you're most proud of?
great question. So I'd say the thing I'm most proud of is that we had once Oakley became very popular, people started diverting our product to retailers that we didn't want. The best example is I buy picnic supplies at Costco, but I don't want to buy my premium brand sunglass brands there. So
Hmm.
there are brokers that we found out that will go to different retailers and offer to buy their inventory of any brand name goods, shampoos, jeans, sunglasses, anything, and they'll pay slightly over wholesale, and then they'll take it to Sunglass Hut once they've accumulated large inventories of it and
Hmm.
mark it up a little more. So small margins, but can be huge quantities. Well, our stuff started showing up in Costco, which I just hated. So we made all of our retailers sign a retail standards agreement that they wouldn't do that. But that didn't stop some of them. So it did help a little bit. So then we started. I don't know if you remember, if you used to go to Six Flags, they'd stamp your hand with this black light number. And if you shine
Hmm.
it under the light, you just ride all the rides for free. Well, I figured, why don't we just do that? And every order we do, we'll just print that black light number on the packaging. And if it shows up in Costco, now I'll know what the order number was, who we sent it to, and when we shipped it to them.
Burn them.
So anyway, all of a sudden, every Costco on the planet had a huge quantity of Oakley sunglasses, and Costco did pretty rare. They do TV advertising. They did TV advertising. So I went into the local one next to Foothill Ranch where our factory was and bought a couple of samples, took it back under the black light, and it was from Sunglass Hut, our largest retailer, and we were doing $80 million a year with them. So I called my contact there. I said, "Hey, Jeff, we just bought some of our glasses from Costco and it came from you." So two things happened. One, we wanted to get it out of there as quick as we could. So our sales reps invited all of our surf shop, bike, and ski shops to their local Costco, and we literally handed out envelopes with $1,000 cash, sometimes to 20 or 30 retail owners. We said, "Will you go into Costco and I want you to buy every pair of glasses that you can?" "Yeah, but this is way more than what you even sold it for." That it doesn't matter.
Brand value doesn't matter.
We want you, and these guys were so stoked. Here's a little surf shop. "Man, did you hear what Oakley did?" I mean, so from a
PR.
brand standpoint, it was huge. I said, "Just give me the receipts and a balance of money if you have cash left over." And we got every sunglass. So we got every sunglass out of there, and then we sued Sunglass Hut for damages. A lot of times it's hard to prove damages, but now I had hard copies. It's like
You've got
we sold it for $50. We had to buy it back for $80, $30 a glass in damages.
My goodness.
So Sunglasses said, "Okay, we're going to fight this." And I said, "Go ahead, but we're not shipping you another sunglass."
So they settled.
And first they said, "Well, you can't do that. We're doing $80 million a year with you." And I said, "Yeah. And I think that means you're doing $160 million a year from our brand. So we're doing it." And I cut Sunglass Hut off. My partner was the most concerned about that. And I had hesitations about it, but I figured they can't afford not to have our product. Yeah. And long term, we could probably eventually recover some of that. But I kind of knew I followed the legal theory down the road. So anyway, we got a couple of $1 million damages suit. We got reimbursed for all of our legal fees, all the glasses that we got back. And then as part of our agreement, they agreed to post $1 million bond that if their glasses showed up in Costco again, they forfeited it. And to this day, not one glass in Costco has been from Sunglass Hut.
That's wild. What year was that?
That would have been 1993, 4, something like that. So.
Okay, wow. So I don't know if you're allowed to say it. I guess probably can. But back in the day, like how much landed cost for your most premium sunglasses? Like how much does that actually cost to make?
Well, each one is different, but it's hard to quantify. Like if you say, well, how much plastic is in this particular frame? It's a few dollars. Where I think our competitive advantage is, almost everybody will mold a sunglass lens to the shape of the frame. But if you know anything about molding, and especially polycarbonate, plutonite material, when you flow material into a mold, it starts to cure or cool around the edges first. It's a metal mold. And it induces distortion into the lens. So what we did was we started making a rectangular lens, and that's why we had a lens cutting machine. So we would just cut the lens shape out of the middle, so it had no distortion in it. So I could say maybe a glass that we wholesaled for $50 maybe cost us about $25 to $30 in parts, labor, packaging, engineering. Yeah. But our lens mold, because the polycarbonate that we used was so refined, we could only make about maybe 20 or 30,000 lenses in a mold, and you'd have to scrap it. And one mold polished to the specs that we had could cost well over $100,000.
Yeah.
So, I mean, each one was different. There's a lot of other costs, insurance, transportation,
sure,
legal, all that, if you burden each product. But so it was really the quality of our materials. We're still the only manufacturer that makes most of our stuff, all of our stuff, in the United States. So.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Where are they in different states, or are they like?
No, it's all in Foothill Ranch, Southern California. We did make titanium frames, and we found it's illegal to mold titanium in California. So we bought a titanium golf shaft and club manufacturer just across the border in Nevada because it's highly explosive. To get titanium to melt, you have to heat it up over 2,700 degrees.
Wow.
And that was a costly enterprise because you flow 2,700 molten titanium into a metal steel mold. We melted a lot of molds before we figured out how they had to be ceramic and they had to be water cooled. So it was a learning curve to figure all that out. So
Yeah. Did you have like experts when you jumped into like the titanium stuff, or are you just like, oh, we're gonna buy this company and go down
oh
and
yeah,
give it a shot?
we tried to ask people smarter than we were, and the
Sure.
golf club guys offered to advise us, but they weren't flowing molten titanium. They were turning it into conical or cylindrical shapes. So it ended
Yeah.
up that we had to go find some expertise, and mostly from the military Department of Defense that we worked
Yeah.
with, because we sold to the military a lot, and we did a lot of kind of always called
Contracts.
double secret military orders
Mm-hmm.
to block certain wavelengths out. We assumed for laser warfare, and we were able to
Wow.
get some good advice and help from them as well. So,
Yeah. Do you have a certain product that you guys made over your stay with Oakley that's like your number one favorite thing that you ever made?
well, it has to be our hideous eye shade that was the sailboarding and then cycling glass, and then became popular in triathlete. I mean, that put us on the map. Probably
Yeah.
one of the biggest brands, and I still wear, is called an M frame. It was one of the first single piece, conical shaped, zero distortion, interchangeable lens with replaceable ear stems on the market. Still one of my
Yeah.
favorites. So,
Yeah, a lot of those styles actually have been coming back around,
uh,
even in the triathlete community quite a bit with the
uh,
big across the face. It looks cool. You look like a superhero of some
yeah.
sort. Yeah.
Well, they're they're just they're technical, and they work. They solve almost all of our eyewear solve a problem.
Yeah.
Now, so they're starting to do some fashion stuff, but back at that time it was always sports specific eyewear.
Yeah, for sure. So, I'm curious with the a question I asked earlier, which was like, what's made you most proud? Do you have like a largest regret?
Mm.
Maybe you don't live with regrets.
Oh no, we had disappointments and setbacks and things like that. There's nothing I could say. Oh, that was just such a bummer. But there's a lot of things I would say. Hey, if that's the worst thing that happened, it was an awesome life,
Yeah,
because that's how you learn. That's how you get experience.
sure.
Is when things turn brown. Okay, how do you prevent that from happening next time, or how do you protect against that, or how do you hedge against that?
Right.
To me, those are learning exercises and opportunities. I mean, I used to intentionally let our sales guys make some mistakes because some of them were so full of themselves you couldn't tell them how to do
Yeah.
something until it didn't work. But it was worth it in the long run. So,
Yeah, there's wisdom in that. So what are you doing nowadays?
man, lots. So I actually do a little fly fishing guiding for the Bighorn Trout Shop on the Bighorn River. I'm
Cool.
on a couple of boards, one for a startup, a backpack company, one for a killer technology HR company on how to filter out resumes to get it down to the two or three you will hire, not the 20 you interview to get it down to the two or three.
Mm-hmm.
I'm involved with a little Christian school on our island, and just a couple of aviation projects for fun. But there's only a couple of those that I have a profit motive. Most of them is just I want to stay engaged, and I still love competition.
So yeah, competition across all aspects, business and how does competition come in flying?
Well, I want to be precise. I want to be the best pilot that air traffic controller talks to if I can.
Sure.
And even fly fishing, I guide a lot of corporate groups. Well, I hate losing more than I love winning because I expect to win. So I don't
Sure.
want another guy to catch more fish or bigger fish than I do. So I still enjoy that. So
Yeah, for sure. So I guess kind of the one final question I want to ask then is, if you were to give one piece of advice to somebody who they just want to be successful in life, what do you think that would be?
yeah, I think it's really important. There's a lot of people, and I've done a fair amount of consulting with businesses and business leaders and fresh out of college, smart guys, um, and so many people that I meet with that have a great idea. They've got their idea has merit, but they want to ensure success. They want to cover every single component, and to me, that's not the way to have success. So if I
Hmm.
had a motto for anybody that wants to start a business or to make a killing in the discipline of the part of the business they're already involved in, it would be ready, shoot, aim. Because sometimes your analytics kind of rule the day now, and it is
Yeah.
very important. But if you don't moderate that a little bit with passion, emotion, and willing to take risk, then at best you're just going to be as good as everybody else is. And to me, if you're going to do something exceptional, whether you're an employee or you're a business owner, a startup, an athlete, you have to differentiate yourself from everybody else, or you're just going to be like everybody else.
Hmm.
So, and if you fail, to me, that's not a bad thing. You know what not to do. And knowing what not to do, Seth, I think is just or more important than knowing what to do. There's a lot of people that can tell you how to do something, but it's those little pitfalls and things of knowing what not to do. A lot of times makes the biggest difference. So,
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Super awesome of you, and we loved having you on. And wish you all the best with fly fishing, aviating, and the backpack company, the HR company, and everything in between.
all right. Well, hope to see you. We can go snowboarding or fly fishing sometime
Yeah,
in the
for
near
sure, man.
future, Seth. And hope you can edit this down into a tolerable amount of time. So,
No, we're not editing it at all. Long form is where it's at. I can listen to a 3 hour podcast where sometimes they're talking about from unicorns to flying planes to everything in between. So
all right.
I think people enjoy it. So
Okay. Well, good luck and thanks for the time. So,
yeah, thanks, man.
all right. Bye.